this is the North New Zealand bush trip. It's flying the Beechcraft Bonanza with the Garmin cockpit. And notice what happens. The Garmin changes the waypoint numbers to USR 22 and 23, which really aren't even correct number-wise, but the actual bush trip, if you look at the nav log, the waypoints are POI as normal, the points of interest names. You can see that Flight Plan is just not recognizing them, so that tells me that Microsoft Flight Simulator is sending out the Garmin flight plan, not the bush trip flight plan that's coming from the nav log. So basically, Flight Plan is looking for the nav log flight plan, the predetermined bush trip flight plan, and now the Garmin is sending out these USR numbers, so it has no way of recognizing where it is. Now, that doesn't even seem to be correct to me, because we're at the airport, NZUN, and that's where we're shown. Flight Plan is showing us at the correct airport now, 22 to 23. It's showing a bearing of 214, but 22 to 23, so that's 22 to 23. No, that's not right either. I really don't know what it's doing. Let's see if we can select our correct leg. Now see, these are just completely different numbers altogether. But we're at NZUN, so I guess I can select my leg. Oh, there it is. So hit menu and then activate leg. No, I want NZUN to the next one. So cancel. I want to activate my leg to user 26, which again has no bearing in reality, but that's the correct waypoint since we're at NZUN. So maybe that'll get our Garmin back on track. So we want to hit menu, activate our leg, NZUN to whatever. Oh, this is not a touchscreen. Enter. Okay, so that at least got us on the correct leg and got our GPS pointed the right direction. Notice what happened here. Flight Plan also is recognizing that now at least the current waypoint, NZUN, makes sense, and then the next waypoint it will find on its own, POI 23, and tell us we're 11.3 miles away, which is correct. But watch what happens when we hit POI 23. Garmin's going to tell us it's user 26, and basically at that point, Flight Plan, the nav log, and the Garmin are all... Well, the navlog and Flight Plan are on the same page, but the Garmin is off doing its own thing. So I'm going to show you how to work around that. Also, as always, I didn't have to load the correct flight plan. See our other videos to load bush trip flight plans. I loaded the entire bush trip and flight plan, but as I've shown in other videos, you can open any flight plan. You can download them off the website. You can open up a separate bush trip. Whatever flight plan you want to open, and you won't have the push pins, you'll just have the map underneath you. So you can use the map and the nav log along with the stopwatch, as you should on a bush trip, to do the navigation manually while still having Google Maps available. I would argue that in real life I would have a map of some kind, be it electronic or even just a paper terrain map. I'd have a road map available if I was flying a bush trip, so that part's not quote-unquote cheating. But yes, if you load your bush trip and just follow the flight path that is displayed for you, yeah, that's cheating. But that's up to you. I mean, you paid for the game, so if you want to fly the bush trip and not mess around with your compass and your stopwatch, I figure that's your prerogative. We've now reset the Garmin to the correct airport. I don't know what it was left on. And then we're actually heading to point of interest 23, which Flight Plan is displaying. Of course, this is a bush trip, so the descriptions really just point to the actual bush trip description. Again, the expectation is you'll use your nav log, but we're going to head off in a southeasterly direction. One of the things you can do, irrespective of the Garmin, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and adjust your heading and keep track of your heading as you fly. So as I hit my waypoints, the procedure really should be to reset your stopwatch and set your heading and restart it. And that way you can see how you're doing against the aircraft operating speed, versus the weather and so forth. So let's take off for Wangamatta, and I'll show you how to work around the Garmin renaming the waypoints. All right, so we're coming up on the first waypoint, which is in reality POI 24. Or no, I'm sorry, it's Wangamata. And so we're going to pass over Wangamata, and what's going to happen? Well, it already happened. It's now switched to user 26 as our current waypoint, which is not a thing. And so our next waypoint from the aircraft is user 27, which is also not a thing. So basically that's what flight plan is telling us. I can't find either of the waypoints that Flight Simulator is sending to me, so I don't know what to do. So it's following our aircraft, but it's not giving us any advice. So now if we say, well, user 26 is actually POI 23, and if I don't know that, you just zoom out a little bit. No matter which waypoint is selected, your aircraft is going to be followed by GPS follow. I would want to select my correct waypoint, which is POI 23. If I select it, flight plan will center it in the map, and it'll turn on my little current button telling me that flight plan is holding this, no matter what the glass cockpit says. And now if I turn on GPS follow, it's saying, well, the glass cockpit's telling me user 26. I don't know what it's talking about, but our next waypoint is this description, which happens to correspond to the description in the waypoint, but it would normally be the name of the next waypoint. And you'll notice that it's keeping track of our distance to that waypoint. We're going to have to do that at each waypoint because, again, every time the Garmin sends out these user numbers that don't match to the nav log and they don't match to the flight plan, there's really nothing flight plan can do with that information. So it's just basically displaying the real-time coordinates and direction of the aircraft, but it can't determine what the current waypoint or the next waypoint is based on the data coming from the glass cockpit. It's just the most recent version of the Garmin's. Any of the aircraft with either the older Garmin or any of the other glass cockpits, even the commercial aircraft seem to follow correctly. So right along the shore there, I'm sure is village of Witaroa and Waihi Beach. It should be point of interest 24, which is what flight plan is expecting. And here's our push pin on Waihi Beach. It switches to USR 27. Not in the flight plan. It's telling us probably USR 28 is our next waypoint, also not in the flight plan. We're just back to following the aircraft. So if I click my push pin to select it, again, these descriptions are funky because they're the descriptions for the nav log, but I have the nav log, so POI 24 is the one I want. I just passed it. That's now my current. Turn on GPS follow, and again, user 27 is not in the flight plan, but my next one is whatever this is, and we can look over here and see POI 25 is Matakana Island, and here's what we're going to do. We're coming up on the Pacific Ocean right now, and we've got 7.2 miles to Matakana Island, and off you go. Essentially, in this flight plan, if you don't load the bush trip itself and just load a map to go underneath you, you will be using your compass and your stopwatch to navigate, because whether I had the correct flight plan loaded or not, the waypoints being sent out by the glass cockpit are invalid regardless. They're just not the right numbering scheme. Way to use flight plan in these bush trips that have the newer Garmin cockpit, you will have to manually track your waypoints if you load them at all. Again, if I loaded just any random flight plan, so here's Istanbul, Turkey, but if I go back into cockpit map, my route's in Istanbul and I'm getting a generic Google map for where my aircraft location is. And of course, user 27 is not in this flight plan, and in fact, POI 25 wouldn't be in this flight plan either. You would have to keep track of your heading and use heading mode. I'm supposed to be heading Well, now I've completely lost track of where I'm supposed to be. Matakana Island is here, so I'm on track. And then my next waypoint will be at a heading of 122, and I could actually change my glass cockpit to heading mode, and my flight director's still on. And now I can still follow my glass cockpit as it leads me to my next heading, in this case 122. Now you can actually see the glass cockpit is still keeping track of my flight path. It thinks I should be over here somewhere. So because it does have the flight plan loaded, it's just using its own waypoint numbers instead of the predefined ones. So that's how to use flight plan with the newer Garmin cockpit. Hope that helps. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe.